Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Sarah Rodriguez, and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 11 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Tommy Chen turned into something that still haunts me. The call came in at 4:47 p.m. on October 15th, just as the autumn sun was beginning its early descent behind the ridgeline. Tommy Chen, 26 years old from Nashville, had failed to return from what his girlfriend described as a quick day hike to Cataract Falls. She'd expected him back by 3 p.m. Now, with darkness approaching faster each day and temperatures dropping into the 30s, we had maybe 2 hours of usable daylight left. I was paired with Jake Phillips, a rookie ranger who'd transferred from Yellowstone just 3 months prior. Jake was competent enough, but the Smokies were different, older, more unpredictable. The mountains here held secrets that went back centuries, Cherokee legends that the old-timers whispered about during long winter nights at the ranger station. Chen's girlfriend said he's an experienced hiker, Jake reported, reading from his notepad as we loaded our gear into the truck. Been coming here since college. Knows the trails. That worried me more than if he'd been a novice. Experienced hikers who knew these trails didn't just disappear. They knew to stay on marked paths, especially with hunting season approaching and the bears fattening up for winter. But every year we lost someone. Sometimes we found them. Sometimes we didn't. The Cataract Falls Trail was a moderate 3.2-mile loop that most hikers could complete in under 3 hours. Tommy had started around 10 a.m. according to the parking permit on his Honda Civic, which sat alone in the gravel lot as we arrived. The wind carried the scent of decomposing leaves and something else, something that made my skin prickle with unease. "Radio check," I called into my handheld as we shouldered our packs. "Ranger station, loud and clear," came Dave's voice from headquarters. "Copy. Beginning search for missing hiker on Cataract Falls Trail. 2-person team. Estimated return 8 p.m. "Roger that, Sarah. Weather service says clear skies tonight, but temps dropping fast. Keep us posted." Jake and I started up the trail at a brisk pace. The path was well maintained for the first mile, passing through stands of oak and maple trees that blazed orange and red in the dying light. Our boots crunched through layers of fallen leaves, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. But something felt wrong. The usual forest sounds, bird calls, squirrel chatter, the rustle of small animals, were absent. It was too quiet. "You hear that?" Jake asked, stopping suddenly. "What?" "Nothing. That's what's weird. Where are all the animals?" I'd been thinking the same thing. In 11 years working these mountains, I'd never experienced such complete silence. Even the wind had died down to an unsettling stillness. We pressed on, calling Tommy's name every few minutes. Our voices seemed swallowed by the trees, dampened in a way that defied acoustics. At the 1-mile marker, we found our first sign, a granola bar wrapper beside the trail. Not unusual, except it was perfectly clean, as if it had been dropped minutes ago instead of hours. "Could be his," Jake said, bagging the wrapper. "Cliff Bar, peanut butter flavor." I keyed my radio. "Ranger station. We've got possible evidence at mile marker 1. Continuing search." Static answered me. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. "Ranger station, this is Rodriguez. Radio check." More static, then a voice that might have been Dave but sounded wrong somehow, distorted like it was coming from underwater. "Copy. Rodriguez. Interference in your sector. Maintain." The transmission cut to white noise. "Atmospheric interference," Jake suggested, but his voice carried doubt. "Mountains can play hell with radio signals." We reached the waterfall as the sun touched the horizon. Cataract Falls was a 60-foot cascade that thundered into a deep pool surrounded by moss-covered boulders. In summer, it was a popular swimming spot, but now the water ran black and cold, reflecting the darkening sky like obsidian. "Tommy," I called. "Tommy Chen." My voice bounced off the rock walls in diminishing echoes. But underneath the sound of falling water, I heard something else. A response that wasn't quite right. Not a voice exactly, but something that might have been trying to imitate one. "Did you hear that?" I asked Jake. He was crouched beside the pool's edge, examining something. "Sarah, you need to see this." Scattered on the flat rocks were Tommy's belongings. His day pack, water bottle, a digital camera, and his hiking boots. But they were arranged too neatly, almost ceremonially, in a perfect circle around a depression in the stone. "No hiker would leave their boots," Jake said. "Not voluntarily." I photographed the scene, my hands trembling slightly as I worked. The camera's flash illuminated details that made my stomach clench. The boots weren't just removed. They'd been sliced open with something sharp, the leather peeled back like flower petals. Dried blood stained the rock around them. "We need to call this in," I said, reaching for my radio. Static, dead air, not even the background hiss of an open channel. "Mine's dead too," Jake reported, checking his handheld. Batteries were fresh this morning. The temperature was dropping fast now, our breath visible in the gathering dusk. I shouldered Tommy's pack, noting it felt lighter than it should. When I unzipped it, I found it nearly empty. Just a first aid kit and some trail mix. No extra clothes, no emergency supplies. No experienced hiker would venture out so unprepared. "Someone else has been here," I said. "Someone took his gear." That's when we heard the whistle. 3 sharp blasts echoed from somewhere upslope, the universal distress signal. Jake and I exchanged glances. It could be Tommy, injured but alive. Or it could be whoever had done this to his belongings. "Protocol says we respond to distress signals," Jake said. "Protocol also says we don't split up and we maintain radio contact with base." I checked my watch. "We've got maybe 30 minutes of light left." Another series of whistles, closer now. They seemed to come from the trail that led up the left side of the falls, a steep, poorly maintained path that most day hikers avoided. Against my better judgment, we followed. The narrow trail switchbacked up the canyon wall, forcing us to use our flashlights as full darkness settled over the mountains. The beam of my mag light seemed dimmer than usual, the batteries draining faster than they should. Behind me, Jake's light flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows that made every tree trunk look like a lurking figure. "There," Jake whispered, grabbing my arm. Ahead, perhaps 50 yards up the trail, a figure sat on a fallen log. Male, wearing a red jacket that matched the description Tommy's girlfriend had given us. He sat perfectly still, facing away from us. "Tommy?" I called. "Tommy Chen?" The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge us. As we approached, our lights revealed more details that made my mouth go dry. He was barefoot, his feet pale and dirty. His red jacket was torn in several places, revealing patches of skin underneath that looked wrong somehow. Too pale, with dark veins visible beneath the surface. "Tommy, are you okay?" Jake asked, moving closer. That's when the figure turned around. It was Tommy Chen's face, or something wearing it. The features were right. The dark hair, the narrow nose, the wire-rimmed glasses now cracked and hanging askew. But the expression was all wrong. His mouth hung open in a perfect circle like he was perpetually surprised. His eyes were completely black, reflecting our flashlight beams like an animal's. And he was smiling, not with his mouth, which remained frozen in that O of surprise, but with his eyes. They crinkled at the corners with malevolent joy. "Jesus Christ," Jake breathed, stumbling backward. The thing wearing Tommy's face stood up with movements that were too fluid, too graceful. It was like watching a marionette being manipulated by an expert puppeteer. When it spoke, the voice was Tommy's, but wrong. Too deep, too hollow. "Help me," it said. "I'm lost." Every instinct I'd developed in 11 years of ranger work screamed at me to run, but I'd sworn an oath to protect visitors to this park. And if there was even a chance this was really Tommy, injured and confused. "Tommy, we're here to help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Can you tell me what happened?" The thing tilted its head at an impossible angle, nearly 90 degrees to the left. I fell, it said, into the dark place. But something else climbed out. Jake had his hand on his sidearm now, a .40 caliber Glock that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. "Sarah, we need to get out of here now." The Tommy thing took a step toward us, and I saw that its feet weren't touching the ground. It hovered perhaps an inch above the trail, leaving no footprints in the soft earth. "Where are your boots, Tommy?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. "I gave them to the hungry earth," it replied, "along with the warm parts, the parts that remember sunlight." It took another step, and the temperature around us plummeted. Frost began forming on the nearby trees, crackling as it spread across the bark. My breath came out in white puffs that hung in the air longer than they should. "Run," I whispered to Jake. We turned and fled down the trail, our flashlights casting wild shadows as we stumbled over roots and loose stones. Behind us I could hear laughter, not Tommy's laugh, but something older, hungrier. It echoed off the canyon walls like the cry of some primordial predator. Jake went down hard about halfway to the falls, his ankle twisting on a loose rock. I hauled him to his feet, but he could barely put weight on his left leg. "Go," he gasped. "Get help. Not leaving you." The laughter was getting closer, and underneath it I could hear something else. Footsteps, but too many of them. Like a crowd was following us down the dark trail. We limped toward the falls as fast as Jake's injury would allow. My flashlight died completely now, leaving us with only Jake's intermittent beam. In the brief flashes of illumination, I caught glimpses of figures moving between the trees. Too tall to be human, with arms that hung too long and faces that were just wrong. We reached the waterfall clearing as my radio crackled to life. "Rodriguez, Rodriguez, respond." "Dave," I gasped into the handset. "Emergency at Cataract Falls. We found Tommy Chen, but something's wrong. Something's very wrong. We need immediate backup and medical evacuation." "Sarah, can't understand it, breaking up. The missing hiker is hostile. Repeat, hostile. Jake's injured. We need—" The radio went dead with a final burst of static. The Tommy thing emerged from the trail behind us, no longer bothering to walk. It floated 3 feet off the ground now, its arms spread wide. The other figures I'd glimpsed followed. Tall, emaciated shapes that might once have been human. Some wore the faded remnants of hiking clothes. Others were naked, their skin mottled and gray. "The park has many secrets," the Tommy thing said, its voice echoing from multiple throats. "Many hungry places. We've been feeding them for so long." Jake tried to draw his weapon, but his hands were shaking too badly to clear the holster. One of the gray figures moved behind him with impossible speed. There was a sound like breaking branches, and Jake screamed once before going limp. I ran. I abandoned my injured partner and ran like a coward through the forest, crashing through underbrush and leaping fallen logs in blind panic. Branches tore at my face and uniform. Something pursued me, many somethings, their footsteps matching mine exactly like a twisted echo. I don't remember how I made it back to the parking lot. One moment I was stumbling through dense woods. The next I was pounding on the driver's side window of my truck, fumbling for keys with numb fingers. The Honda Civic was gone. I drove back to headquarters in a state of shock, my radio permanently dead, my story sounding insane even to me. Dave organized a search party immediately, 8 rangers with full tactical gear and emergency lighting. We returned to Cataract Falls at dawn. We found no trace of Jake Phillips, no blood, no clothing, no equipment. His radio and sidearm were gone. Even his footprints had vanished from the trail, as if he'd never been there at all. Tommy's belongings were still arranged in their perfect circle around the depression in the rock, but when we examined them closely, we discovered they weren't his. The pack belonged to Michael Torres, a hiker who'd gone missing in 1998. The water bottle was registered to Jennifer Walsh, disappeared 2003. The camera contained photos of places that shouldn't exist, underground caverns filled with pale, moving shapes. The official report listed Jake Phillips as missing, presumed dead due to a fall while conducting a search and rescue operation. Tommy Chen remained on the missing persons list. The case was closed after 2 weeks when no further evidence was found. But I know the truth. I know because 3 days later, Jake Phillips returned to the ranger station. He walked through the front door during the morning briefing, looking exactly like he always had except for his eyes. Those black, reflecting eyes that smiled with malevolent joy. He spoke in Jake's voice, remembered Jake's memories, even showed concern for his injured ankle. But I knew. I recognized the two fluid movements, the way he stood just slightly off the ground, the cold that followed him wherever he went. The thing wearing Jake's face works alongside me now. It files reports, guides tours, helps with search and rescue operations. The other rangers see nothing wrong. It's perfect in every detail except for those eyes and the way missing hikers' belongings sometimes appear in its locker. I've tried to transfer to other parks, but my requests are always denied. Personnel says I'm too valuable here, that my experience in the Smokies is irreplaceable. They don't understand that every day I work beside that thing. It learns more about being human. It studies me, mimics my mannerisms, practices Jake's laugh until it sounds exactly right. Sometimes I catch it watching me with those black eyes, and I know it's deciding whether I should disappear next. Whether another ranger might return from a search and rescue operation, looking exactly like Sarah Rodriguez but wrong in all the ways that matter. I've stopped responding to missing person calls when I'm paired with the Jake thing. I make excuses, claim illness, volunteer for administrative duties. But eventually, they'll insist. They'll send us out together into the dark woods where hungry places wait to be fed. Last week, I overheard it talking to Dave about a concerning pattern. How I've been acting strangely since Jake's disappearance, showing signs of PTSD and paranoid behavior. It suggested I might need psychological evaluation, possibly medical leave. It's building a case to remove me, and once I'm gone, once I'm not around to recognize what it really is, the Jake thing will be free to help more hikers disappear into the hungry, dark places of the Smokies. The worst part is knowing that somewhere in those caverns beneath the mountains, the real Jake Phillips might still be alive, changed, transformed into one of those gray figures that hunt for the hungry earth. Aware but powerless, watching through dead eyes as something else wears his face and lives his life. I've started carrying a silver knife, an old Cherokee blade I bought from a trader in Gatlinburg. The seller claimed it could cut through lies and illusions, reveal things as they truly are. I don't know if that's true, but it's all I have. Tonight, I'm scheduled for a search and rescue call. Another missing hiker, a college student named Rebecca Clark who failed to return from the Laurel Falls Trail. The Jake thing will be my partner. I've made my peace with what's going to happen. Either I'll come back having destroyed the thing that's been wearing my partner's face, or I won't come back at all. But I refuse to let it continue feeding hikers to whatever horror lives beneath these ancient mountains. The Cherokee called this place Shaconage, place of the blue smoke. They knew about the hungry places, the spirits that dwelt in caves and hollers where sunlight never reached. They told stories about wendigos and shapeshifters, about people who went into the mountains and came back wrong. I should have listened to those stories. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back from tonight's search. My body might return to the ranger station tomorrow morning wearing my face and speaking with my voice. But it won't be me. Look for the eyes. They'll be black and reflective, holding an intelligence that isn't human. And whatever you do, don't let it pair you for a search and rescue mission in the deep woods. Don't follow it into the hungry, dark places where missing people go. Some searches are meant to fail. Some people are meant to stay lost. And some park rangers shouldn't come home. My name is Sarah Rodriguez, and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 11 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Marcus Chen turned into something that still haunts me. The radio crackled to life at 4:47 p.m., just as the autumn sun began its final descent behind the towering Douglas firs. October in Olympic National Park meant early darkness, and with it came the kind of cold that seeped through your bones and settled there like a permanent resident. Ranger Rodriguez, we have a missing person report. Marcus Chen, 28-year-old male, failed to return from a day hike on the Enchanted Valley Trail. Last seen this morning around 8 a.m. at the Graves Creek trailhead. I pressed the radio button, my breath forming small clouds in the rapidly cooling air. Copy that, dispatch. Any companions? Negative. Solo hiker. His vehicle is still at the trailhead. Family reported him missing when he failed to show for dinner. He was supposed to be back by 3 p.m. I glanced at my watch. Nearly 5 hours overdue. In October, with daylight dying at 6 p.m., that was a lifetime in the wilderness. I'd seen what happened to people caught unprepared in these mountains after dark. The cold was merciless, and the terrain unforgiving. "I'm heading out now," I radioed back, already gathering my gear. Estimated arrival at Graves Creek in 30 minutes. The drive to the trailhead was routine, but something felt off. In my 11 years patrolling these forests, I'd developed an instinct for when the wilderness was simply challenging versus when it was actively hostile. Tonight, as the shadows lengthened between the massive tree trunks, the forest felt hungry. At Graves Creek, Marcus Chen's silver Honda Civic sat alone in the parking area, covered in a thin layer of fallen leaves. I ran the plates. Everything checked out. Inside the vehicle, I found a day pack on the passenger seat with extra water bottles, energy bars, and a first aid kit. Smart hiker. Experienced. That made his disappearance more concerning, not less. I shouldered my pack, switched on my radio, and started up the trail. The Enchanted Valley route was 13 miles round trip. Ambitious for a day hike in October, but doable for someone in good shape. The trail followed the East Fork Quinault River, winding through old-growth forest before opening into the glacial valley. Dispatch, this is Rodriguez. Beginning trail search 5:23 p.m. Daylight remaining approximately 40 minutes. Copy, Rodriguez. Search and rescue team is being mobilized but won't reach you for at least 2 hours. Proceed with caution. The first 3 miles passed without incident. I called Marcus's name every few minutes, my voice echoing off the massive tree trunks. The forest responded with only the sound of wind through branches and the distant rush of the river. No response. No broken branches or disturbed undergrowth to indicate someone had left the trail. At mile marker 4, I found the first sign. A granola bar wrapper, partially buried under a pile of wet leaves. The brand matched what I'd seen in Marcus's car. I bagged it and marked the GPS coordinates. 47.4821 degree Ren, 123.5947 degree W. Standard procedure, though a dropped snack wrapper hardly indicated foul play. As I continued deeper into the forest, the temperature began dropping faster than it should have. The weather forecast had called for a low of 38 degrees, but my thermometer was already reading 32. Frost was forming on the edges of leaves, and my breath came out in thick white plumes. Dispatch, this is Rodriguez, experiencing unusually rapid temperature drop at mile marker 5, current reading 32 degrees and falling. Static answered me. I tried again. More static. I checked my radio. Full battery, proper channel. The LED display showed strong signal strength, but when I keyed the mic, only white noise came through. I made a note to report the dead zone when I got back to range. Mile marker 6 brought me to a wooden bridge spanning a deep ravine. This was where things started to feel wrong. The bridge was intact, but someone had removed every third plank. The gaps were precise, deliberate. Not weather damage or natural decay, but human interference. Below, the ravine dropped 60 feet to jagged rocks and a stream that ran black in the failing light. I shone my flashlight on the remaining planks. They were solid, but crossing would be risky. Had Marcus attempted this crossing? Why would someone sabotage a popular hiking bridge? That's when I noticed the footprints, fresh boot prints in the soft earth at the bridge approach. Size 10 or 11, hiking boots with aggressive lug soles. They led right to the bridge's edge, then simply stopped. No prints on the far side, no signs of someone turning back. I called Marcus's name again, louder this time. My voice bounced off the ravine walls and came back distorted, as if the echo was coming from somewhere much deeper than 60 feet. Behind me, a branch snapped. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the growing darkness. Nothing. Just the endless corridor of tree trunks fading into shadow. But the air had changed. The natural sounds of the forest, the rustle of small animals, the creak of branches, the distant call of an owl, had stopped completely. The silence was absolute. I keyed my radio again. Dispatch, this is Rodriguez. Located possible evidence at mile marker 6. Damaged bridge structure and fresh footprints. Requesting backup immediately. Nothing but static. A new sound reached my ears. Whistling. Not the wind through trees, but a human whistle. A simple, repetitive tune that seemed to come from the direction I'd just traveled. Someone was on the trail behind me. "Marcus? Marcus Chen?" I called out. The whistling stopped. I started back down the trail, moving quickly but carefully. After 50 yards, I stopped and listened. The whistling resumed, but now it was coming from ahead of me, in the direction I was moving. As if whoever was making the sound had somehow gotten in front of me. That was impossible. The trail was narrow, with dense undergrowth on both sides. No one could have passed me without being seen. I returned to the bridge and decided to cross. The missing planks created gaps of about 3 feet each, manageable if I was careful. I tested the first remaining plank. Solid. I stepped across the first gap, then the second. Halfway across, I heard my radio crackle to life. "Rodriguez, this is dispatch. Rodriguez, do you copy?" I fumbled for my radio, nearly losing my balance on the narrow plank. "Dispatch, this is Rodriguez, I copy." "Sarah, where are you? You've been radio silent for 2 hours." 2 hours? I checked my watch. 5:51 p.m. I'd been on the trail for less than 30 minutes. "Dispatch, that's not possible. I've been hiking for about 25 minutes. "Negative, Rodriguez. Your last transmission was at 3:47 p.m. We've been trying to reach you." 3:47 p.m. But I hadn't even left the ranger station until after 5 p.m. I stared at my watch, then at the GPS unit. Both showed the same impossible time discrepancy. "Sarah, we're sending in a full search team. Your GPS shows you're at mile marker 9, but that's not possible given your departure time." "Mile marker 9? I looked around frantically. There, barely visible in the flashlight beam, was a weathered wooden post with the number 9. But that was wrong. I'd crossed the bridge at mile marker 6 just moments ago. "Dispatch, I need you to listen carefully. Something is very wrong here. I'm experiencing time distortion and GPS anomalies. The bridge at mile marker 6 has been deliberately damaged, and I'm finding evidence that Marcus Chen may have." The line went dead. I tried the radio again. The display had gone dark. When I pressed the power button, nothing happened. I popped the battery compartment. The batteries were corroded, as if they'd been in there for months instead of the fresh AAs I'd installed that morning. Behind me, the whistling started again, closer this time. I turned and saw a figure standing at the far end of the bridge I'd just crossed. In the beam of my flashlight, I could make out a man in hiking clothes. Dark hair, medium build. Marcus Chen. "Marcus," I called out. "Are you hurt? We've been looking for you." He didn't respond. He just stood there perfectly still at the edge of the bridge. As I watched, he raised one hand and pointed into the forest behind me. I followed his gesture with my flashlight beam. There, about 30 yards off the trail, was a small cabin. Wood and stone construction, barely visible through the trees. It wasn't on any of the park maps. In 11 years of patrolling this area, I'd never seen it before. When I looked back at the bridge, Marcus was gone. "Marcus, Marcus." Only silence answered me. I approached the cabin slowly, hand on my service weapon. The structure was old but well maintained. Smoke rose from a stone chimney, and warm light flickered behind curtained windows. Someone was inside. The front door was painted red and stood slightly ajar. Carved into the wood above the frame was a symbol I didn't recognize, an intricate design that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at it. I called out, "Park Service, is anyone inside?" A voice answered from within, female, elderly, speaking in a sing-song cadence. "Come in, dear. Come in out of the cold. We've been waiting for you." Standard protocol said to wait for backup, but backup was hours away, and if Marcus was inside, he might need immediate medical attention. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cabin was larger inside than it appeared from outside, much larger. The front room was furnished with antique furniture and lit by oil lamps. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. The air smelled of herbs and something else, something organic and unpleasant that I couldn't identify. An old woman sat in a rocking chair by the fire. She was knitting with what looked like hair instead of yarn, long, dark strands that caught the lamplight. She looked up at me with eyes that were completely black. "Sarah Rodriguez," she said, though I hadn't introduced myself. "We've been expecting you." "Where is Marcus Chen?" I demanded, hand still on my weapon. "The young man? Oh, he's here. He's safe. Would you like to see him?" She gestured toward a doorway leading deeper into the cabin. Through it, I could see stairs leading down into darkness. "Ma'am, I need you to step outside with me. This is a search and rescue operation and I need to—" The old woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Search and rescue? Oh, my dear, you have it backwards. You're not here to rescue anyone. You're here to be collected." The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath came out in white clouds and frost began forming on the windows. The fire in the fireplace suddenly burned blue, then died completely. "You see," the woman continued, still knitting with that terrible hair, "we've been having trouble with your kind. Park rangers, search teams, people who ask too many questions. They interfere with our work." "What work?" I backed toward the door, but it had swung shut. When I tried the handle, it wouldn't turn. "The collection, dear. Every fall, when the barriers grow thin, we collect what we need. But you rangers, you keep looking. You keep searching. It's very inconvenient." I drew my weapon. "Let me out. Now." The woman's face began to change. Her skin grew gray and mottled, her features elongating. Her fingers, still working the knitting needles, grew into long claws. "Marcus Chen was just the latest," she hissed, her voice now coming from multiple directions at once. "But we need more. We always need more. And you, my dear, will help us get them." From the basement I heard screaming, human screaming, filled with agony and terror. I fired 3 rounds center mass. The bullets passed right through the woman and embedded in the chair behind her. She cackled and continued knitting. "Iron and lead won't help you here, Ranger. This is our place, our rules." The screaming from below intensified and I heard my name being called. Marcus's voice pleading for help. I ran for the basement stairs. The descent seemed to last forever. The stairs were wooden, rotting, and seemed to multiply as I went down. The air grew thick and humid, filled with the stench of decay. My flashlight beam grew weaker with each step, as if the darkness was actively consuming the light. At the bottom, I found myself in a vast underground chamber. The walls were lined with cages, dozens of them, each containing a person in various states of transformation. Some were still recognizably human, others had been changed into things I couldn't identify. All were alive, all were conscious, and all were screaming. In the center of the chamber stood Marcus Chen, or what had been Marcus Chen. His body was intact, but his skin had taken on a gray, bark-like texture. His eyes were completely white, and when he opened his mouth to speak, I could see that his teeth had been replaced with thorns. "Sarah," he said in a voice like wind through dead leaves, "you shouldn't have come here." "Marcus, we need to get you out of here. We need to—" "There is no out," he interrupted. "There's only the collection, only the change. Look around you, Sarah. Look at what they're building." I swept my flashlight beam across the chamber and finally understood the true horror of what I was seeing. The caged figures weren't random victims. They were all wearing uniform pieces, Park Service badges, search and rescue gear, law enforcement equipment. These were rangers, searchers, and investigators who had disappeared over the years. "How long have you been taking people?" I whispered. Marcus tilted his head and I heard the sound of wood creaking. "Time works differently here. Some of these have been here for decades. Others just arrived. But they all came looking for someone who was missing." "The missing persons reports?" "Bait," he confirmed. "We take one, the searchers come. We take the searchers, more come. It's a perfect system." Behind me I heard footsteps on the stairs. The old woman was coming down, along with what sounded like several others. "But tonight is special," Marcus continued. Tonight you're going to help us expand our operation." I backed against the stone wall, looking for another exit. There was none. "The other rangers trust you," Marcus said, approaching slowly. "When you go back, and you will go back, you'll recommend against further searches. You'll falsify reports. You'll send lone rangers into the areas we specify. I'll never—" "Oh, but you will." He smiled, and sap leaked from between his thorn teeth. "Because we're going to plant something inside you. A little seed. And every day it will grow stronger and your will to resist will grow weaker. Until one day you'll wake up and realize you've been working for us all along." The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. I turned to see the old woman, now fully transformed into something that might once have been human, accompanied by two other creatures. One wore the tattered remains of a park ranger uniform. The other had the gear of a search and rescue volunteer. "Sarah Rodriguez," the old woman said, her voice now a chorus of whispers. "Welcome to the family." They moved toward me. I had maybe seconds before they reached me. That's when I remembered the emergency flare in my pack. I yanked it out, pulled the pin, and struck the igniter. Instead of the usual bright red flame, the flare burned an impossible shade of purple, casting everything in an otherworldly light. The creatures recoiled, shrieking. Marcus stumbled backward, his bark-like skin beginning to smoke where the purple light touched it. "Iron and lead won't work," I shouted over their screams. "But let's see how you handle magnesium and strontium." I used the distraction to run for the stairs. Behind me I could hear them giving chase, but the flare seemed to slow them down. I reached the main floor of the cabin and threw my shoulder against the front door. It burst open, and I stumbled out into the forest. The cabin was gone. I stood in a small clearing, surrounded by Douglas firs. Where the cabin had been, there was only a circle of dead grass and a pile of old bones. My GPS showed my location as mile marker 6, right where I'd started investigating the damaged bridge. I checked my watch, 6:15 p.m. Somehow, I'd lost only 25 minutes. My radio crackled to life. "Rodriguez, this is dispatch. What's your status?" "Dispatch, I need backup at mile marker 6. I found evidence of Marcus Chen, but..." I paused, trying to figure out how to explain what couldn't be explained. "I need a full investigation team, and I need them to bring iron. Lots of iron." "Copy that, Rodriguez. Are you injured?" I looked down at my hands. They were dirty, scraped, and shaking. But I was intact. Human. "Negative. But dispatch. When the team gets here, make sure they stay together. Nobody goes anywhere alone. And nobody follows any voices they hear in the forest." "Understood. ETA 20 minutes. I waited by the bridge, flare still burning in my hand. As the purple light began to fade, I heard the whistling again. But this time, it was coming from multiple directions, and this time I recognized one of the voices. It was Marcus Chen. Still down there, still calling for help. Over the next few weeks, the official investigation concluded that Marcus Chen had fallen from the damaged bridge and been swept away by the current. His body was never found. The bridge was repaired and the trail reopened. I filed my report, documenting everything I could without sounding insane. Equipment malfunction, time disorientation due to hypothermia, possible hallucinations caused by stress and isolation. But I knew the truth. Every missing person case that came across my desk after that I investigated personally. I started carrying iron ammunition and flares that burned in unusual colors. I mapped areas where radio communications failed and GPS readings went haywire. And I found more of them. More cabins that appeared and disappeared. More creatures wearing the faces of the missing. More evidence of a collection that had been going on for decades. The worst part is that Marcus was right about one thing. The seed they planted in me did take root. Not in the way they intended, but in a different way. Now I can sense them. I know when they're hunting. I can feel their hunger in the air like a change in barometric pressure. Sometimes, late at night in my ranger station, I hear whistling coming from the forest. Always the same tune. Always getting closer. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I swear I can see something growing behind my eyes. Something that shouldn't be there. I still do my job. I still answer missing person calls. But now I go in armed with more than standard equipment, and when I find the missing, I have to look very carefully to make sure that what comes back with me is actually human. Because out there in the Olympic wilderness, something is still collecting, still growing, still hungry, and every fall when the barriers grow thin and the whistling starts again, I know that somewhere in these mountains there's a ranger who's been missing for 11 years, still calling my name, still waiting for rescue, still warning me to stay away. The official records show that Marcus Chen died in a hiking accident, but the unofficial truth is that Marcus Chen is still out there, changed and twisted, but still aware enough to know what he's become. And next October, when the missing person calls start coming in again, I'll be ready. Because someone has to stand between the collectors and the collected. Someone has to guard the guardians, even if it costs them their soul. My name is Daniel Lopez, and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for 8 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Marcus Bellwether turned into something that still haunts me. The radio crackled to life at 4:47 p.m. on October 15th, just as the autumn sun was beginning its rapid descent behind the jagged peaks of the Continental Divide. I was finishing my afternoon patrol near Avalanche Creek when dispatch came through with the familiar weight of urgency that every ranger knows too well. Unit 7, this is dispatch. We have a missing person report. Male, mid-20s, last seen on the Highline Trail around noon today. Name is Marcus Bellwether. Hiking alone, blue backpack, red jacket. Family reported him overdue at the visitor center. I keyed my radio, watching my breath form small clouds in the crisp air. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees since morning, and the forecast called for an early freeze. Copy, dispatch. I'm 20 minutes from the Highline trailhead. Any additional details on the missing party? Negative, Unit 7. Subject was planning a day hike to Granite Park Chalet. No overnight gear reported. That concerned me immediately. The Highline Trail to Granite Park was an 8.5-mile round trip that most experienced hikers could complete in 5 to 6 hours. If Marcus had started at noon, he should have been back well before dark. The trail wasn't particularly technical, but it did have exposure to sudden weather changes and some steep drop-offs near Haystack Creek. I gunned my truck toward the trailhead, the engine straining against the mountain grade. 8 years of search and rescue in Glacier had taught me that missing person cases fell into predictable categories: injured hikers who couldn't self-rescue, lost hikers who had wandered off trail, or occasionally, hikers who had decided to extend their adventure without telling anyone. The fourth category, the one that kept rangers awake at night, involved people who simply vanished without explanation. As I pulled into the empty trailhead parking lot, I spotted a blue Honda Civic with Minnesota plates. I ran the license through dispatch and confirmed it belonged to Marcus Bellwether. His car was locked, windows up, no signs of disturbance. Through the back window I could see a duffel bag and some energy bar wrappers on the passenger seat. Dispatch Unit 7, located subject's vehicle at Highline Trailhead. Beginning search protocol, requesting additional units and medical standby. Copy, Unit 7. Unit 12 is en route to your location. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. 20 minutes. In October, that would put us starting our search right at sunset. I grabbed my emergency pack, headlamp, and radio gear. My partner, Jake Morrison, would be here soon, but I couldn't wait. Every minute mattered when hypothermia was a factor. The Highline Trail begins deceptively easy, following an old roadbed through dense forest before opening up to the spectacular traverse along the garden wall. I moved quickly but methodically, calling Marcus's name every few hundred yards and listening for any response. The autumn forest was unusually quiet. No bird calls, no small animal movements. Just the sound of my boots on the frost-covered trail and the distant whisper of wind through the dying leaves. About 2 miles in, I found the first sign. A red piece of fabric was caught on a low branch about 3 feet off the trail. I examined it carefully with my flashlight. It looked like it had come from a jacket, the right color and material based on the description. But something felt wrong about its placement. The fabric was on the uphill side of the trail, hanging about head height. If Marcus had snagged his jacket, it would more likely be at hip or shoulder level on the downhill side where hikers typically brush against vegetation. I photographed the fabric with my camera and continued up the trail. The temperature was dropping rapidly now, and my radio began picking up strange interference, static bursts that didn't match any known signal patterns in the area. Unit 12, Unit 7, radio check. Static. Unit 12, this is Unit 7, do you copy? More static, then Jake's voice came through broken and distorted. Unit 7, issues with interference. En route to. I tried switching channels, but the static persisted across all frequencies. Radio dead zones weren't uncommon in the mountains, but I was in an area that typically had good coverage. I made a mental note to report the communication issues to maintenance. As I approached the area where the trail begins its traverse of the garden wall, I noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Boot prints in a muddy section of trail, but they were pointing in both directions. Someone had walked up the trail, then turned around and walked back down. Recent prints, made within the last few hours based on the sharp edges and lack of weather degradation. But that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was that there were 3 sets of prints, 2 sets going up, 1 set coming back down. I knelt down and examined them more carefully with my headlamp. 2 different boot patterns, both size 10 or 11. Marcus was supposedly hiking alone, but these prints suggested he'd been with someone, or that someone had followed him. I radioed dispatch with my findings, fighting through the static. Dispatch Unit 7, located possible boot prints suggesting subject may not have been alone, requesting additional search personnel and supervisor notification. The response was garbled, but I caught fragments. Proceed with caution. Backup. Weather moving in. Weather moving in. I looked up at the sky and saw what dispatch was referring to. A wall of dark clouds was moving in from the west, much faster than the morning forecast had predicted. The temperature was dropping noticeably, and I could smell snow in the air. I picked up my pace, following the trail as it wound around the mountainside. The exposure here was significant. 1,000-foot drop to the valley below on my right, steep rock walls on my left. This was not a place to be caught in bad weather after dark. About a mile further, I found Marcus's backpack. It was sitting upright on a large boulder about 20 feet off the trail, positioned as if someone had carefully placed it there. Not dropped, not discarded, placed. I approached cautiously, calling out Marcus's name and listening for any response. The backpack was a blue Gregory Day pack, consistent with the description. I photographed it in place before examining the contents. Water bottle, energy bars, map, first aid kit, cell phone. The phone was dead, but that wasn't unusual. Cell coverage was non-existent in this area. What was unusual was that everything was still inside. If Marcus had been injured and crawled off the trail, he would have taken at least the water and first aid kit. I looked around for any signs of where Marcus might have gone. No blood, no other gear, no obvious trail leading away from the boulder. It was as if he had simply set down his pack and vanished. My radio squawked to life with a clearer signal. Unit 7, this is Unit 12. I'm at the trailhead. Weather Service is calling for sudden storm development. Recommend immediate evacuation of search personnel. I looked at the advancing clouds and made a decision that would haunt me. Unit 12, I'm continuing up to Granite Park. Subject may be seeking shelter. I'll do a quick sweep and head back down. Negative, Unit 7. Weather conditions deteriorating rapidly. Return to trailhead immediately. Unit 12, I have a missing hiker and I'm less than a mile from Granite Park Chalet. I'm continuing the search. Static filled my radio for several seconds before Jake's voice came through. Daniel, I'm heading up behind you. Don't go in alone. But I was already moving. The professional part of my brain knew Jake was right. Search and rescue protocol called for team operations, especially in deteriorating conditions. But 8 years of finding lost hikers had also taught me that the difference between life and death often came down to minutes. If Marcus was injured and seeking shelter at the chalet, those minutes mattered. The trail wound upward through increasingly stunted vegetation as I approached the alpine zone. The first snowflakes began falling, large wet flakes that stuck to everything and reduced visibility. My headlamp beam reflected off the falling snow, creating a disorienting strobe effect that made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. That's when I heard the voice. Help. Help me. Faint, distant, coming from somewhere off the trail to my left. I stopped and listened, trying to determine the direction. The voice came again, definitely male, weak but audible over the wind. Marcus? Marcus, is that you? Help. Please. I followed the voice, leaving the main trail and picking my way carefully through the rocks and low shrubs. The sound seemed to be coming from a small depression about 50 yards uphill from the trail. I called out as I moved, "I'm a park ranger. Keep talking so I can find you." The voice responded, but something about it bothered me. It was too consistent, too rhythmic, like a recording being played on loop. But I pushed that thought aside. Hypothermia could cause confusion and repetitive speech patterns. I found him in a small hollow between two large boulders, partially sheltered from the wind. A man in a red jacket, blue jeans, brown hiking boots. He was sitting with his back against one of the rocks, knees drawn up, head down. "Marcus, I'm Ranger Lopez. Are you injured?" He didn't respond. I approached carefully, noting that he wasn't shivering despite the cold. That was a bad sign. Late-stage hypothermia. I knelt down beside him and reached out to check his pulse. The moment my hand touched his shoulder, he looked up at me. His eyes were completely black, not dark brown, not dilated pupils, completely black, like looking into deep water at night. And his skin was gray, with a waxy texture that reminded me of old candles. But what made my blood freeze was his smile. It was too wide, stretching from ear to ear, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. And when he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once, behind me, above me, from inside my own head. "Thank you for coming, Ranger Lopez. We've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, reaching for my radio, but the thing that looked like Marcus was already moving. It rose from its sitting position in one fluid motion, like it was being pulled up by invisible strings. Its movements were wrong, joints bending in directions that shouldn't be possible. Unit 12, emergency on Highline Trail. I need immediate backup." Static. Dead air. The radio was completely silent. The Marcus thing tilted its head at an unnatural angle, still smiling that horrible smile. "Marcus is safe, Ranger Lopez. He's with the others now. They're all safe." "Where is he? Where's Marcus?" "Close, very close. Would you like to see them?" Before I could respond, I heard voices calling my name from different directions. At least 6 different voices, all calling, "Ranger Lopez, help us, we're lost." But I recognized some of those voices. Sarah Mitchell, a hiker who had vanished 2 years ago. Tom Bradley, a backpacker who disappeared last summer. Voices of people who were never found, who were presumed dead or lost to the wilderness. The Marcus thing began walking toward me, its movements becoming more fluid and natural with each step, as if it was learning to inhabit the body properly. "They've been waiting, Ranger Lopez. All the missing people. They've been waiting in the safe place." I backed away, my hand moving instinctively to the bear spray on my belt. "Stay back, don't come any closer. We don't want to hurt you. We want to help. You've been searching for us for so long. Always searching, always worried, always carrying the weight of the ones you couldn't save." The words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. Every ranger carried that weight. The hikers we couldn't find, the families we couldn't give closure, the cases that remained open and haunting. "We can take that burden from you, Ranger Lopez. You can stop searching, you can rest." The voices calling my name were getting closer, coming from all directions now. I could see lights moving through the trees, flashlight beams sweeping back and forth like search patterns. But the lights were wrong. They were too bright, too focused, and they cast shadows that moved independently of their sources. I turned and ran. I crashed through the undergrowth back toward the main trail, my headlamp beam bouncing wildly as I stumbled over rocks and roots. Behind me, I could hear the Marcus thing following, but its footsteps didn't sound right. They were too heavy, like something much larger than a human was moving through the forest, and the voices kept calling, "Ranger Lopez, we found something, come see." I reached the main trail and started running back toward the trailhead, but after a few hundred yards I realized something was wrong. The trail markers were pointing in the wrong direction. Every trail junction I passed had signs indicating I was heading deeper into the backcountry, not back toward the parking area. I stopped and checked my GPS unit. The screen showed my location as coordinates that didn't exist, numbers that would place me somewhere in the middle of Flathead Lake, 40 miles away. I turned the unit off and on, but it continued showing impossible readings. My radio crackled. Unit 7, this is Unit 12. Daniel, where are you? I'm at the location where you found the backpack, but there's no backpack here. Jake, thank God. I'm heading back down the trail. I found Marcus, but something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Daniel, what do you mean you found Marcus? Marcus Bellwether was found safe at the visitor center 2 hours ago. He never went hiking today. His family made a mistake. He was at a hotel in Kalispell the whole time. The words didn't make sense. I had found his car, his backpack, the fabric from his jacket. I had followed his boot prints. I had seen him with those horrible black eyes. Jake, that's impossible. I'm looking at his tracks right now. Daniel, there are no tracks. The trail is covered with fresh snow. It's been snowing for hours. I looked down at the ground. Jake was right. The trail was covered with at least 3 inches of snow, and it was falling heavily now. But I had been following clear boot prints just minutes ago. The fabric I'd found, the backpack, none of it made sense if Marcus had never been here. Jake, I need you to listen to me carefully. There's something on this trail that isn't human. It took the form of Marcus Bellwether, and it's been calling to me using the voices of people who went missing in the park. Silence on the radio for several seconds. Then, Daniel, you need to get off that mountain right now. You're showing signs of altitude sickness or hypothermia. Your thinking is compromised. But I knew what I had seen. The black eyes, the impossible smile, the way it moved. And I could still hear the voices calling from the forest around me. Though they were fainter now, I continued down the trail, moving as quickly as I dared in the snow. Every few minutes I would catch glimpses of lights moving through the trees parallel to the trail. Sometimes I could make out human silhouettes, but they were wrong. Too tall, or walking in ways that suggested their joints bent backward. About halfway back to the trailhead, I came to a section of trail I didn't recognize. The terrain was completely different. Instead of the typical rocky alpine environment, I was walking through dense forest with massive old-growth trees. Trees that should have been cut down when the trail was built in the 1930s. I checked my GPS again, still showing impossible coordinates. I tried my compass, but the needle spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. That's when I heard Jake's voice coming from the forest to my right. Daniel, over here, I found something. But Jake should have been behind me on the trail, not in the forest. And his voice sounded strange. Too eager, too excited. Jake, is that you? Yes, come quick. You need to see this. I moved toward the voice, pushing through thick undergrowth. After about 50 yards, I found a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was Jake, or something wearing Jake's uniform and equipment. He was standing perfectly still, facing away from me. Jake? He turned around slowly, and I saw the same black eyes, the same impossible smile I had seen on the Marcus thing. But this version was more confident, more practiced in its mimicry. Hello, Daniel. We've been practicing. Multiple voices spoke in unison from the Jake thing's mouth. My voice, Jake's voice, Marcus's voice, and others I didn't recognize. A chorus of stolen voices. We're getting better at being human. Soon we won't need the missing ones anymore. We'll be able to take anyone. I ran again, crashing through the forest, no longer caring about staying on the trail. Behind me, I could hear multiple sets of footsteps following, and voices calling out, Daniel, wait! Ranger Lopez, we need help! Don't leave us! We're so cold! I stumbled out of the forest and found myself on a road, not a trail, but an actual paved road. That was impossible. There were no roads in this part of the park, but I could see headlights approaching from both directions. I flagged down the first vehicle, a park service truck driven by my supervisor, Chief Ranger Patricia Williams. Daniel, what the hell are you doing out here? We've been looking for you for hours. I climbed into the passenger seat, shaking from cold and fear. "Chief, there's something in the park. Something that takes the form of missing people. It tried to get me." Patricia looked at me with concern. "Daniel, you've been missing for 6 hours. Jake found your truck at the trailhead, but there was no sign of you on the trail. We've had 3 search teams out looking." 6 hours? That's impossible. I was only up there for maybe 2 hours. She handed me a thermos of coffee and started driving back toward park headquarters. "It's 2:30 a.m., Daniel. You went up that trail at sunset. What's the last thing you remember clearly?" I tried to piece together the timeline, but it didn't make sense. I remembered finding the fabric, the backpack, the boot prints. I remembered the Marcus thing with its black eyes. But Patricia was right. According to my watch, 6 hours had passed. "Chief, I need to report something. There's an entity in the park that can take human form. It's been collecting missing people, and it tried to collect me." Patricia pulled over and turned to look at me directly. "Daniel, you're hypothermic, and you've been alone in the mountains for 6 hours in a snowstorm. What you experienced was likely a combination of altitude effects, cold exposure, and psychological stress. It's more common than you think." But I knew what I had seen. And over the following weeks, as I tried to return to normal patrol duties, I began to notice things that confirmed my fears. Missing person reports that followed the same pattern. Hikers who vanished without a trace, leaving behind perfectly preserved gear and impossible evidence. Witnesses who reported seeing the missing people after they had officially disappeared. Search dogs that refused to track certain scents or became agitated in specific areas of the park. And voices. Always voices calling from the forest during night patrols, using the names and voices of people who were never found. The official report listed my experience as altitude-induced hallucinations complicated by hypothermia. Chief Williams recommended I take a week of administrative leave and undergo a psychological evaluation before returning to full duty. But I know what I saw up there. Something is collecting our missing people, learning from them, using them to lure others into the wilderness. And it's getting better at being human. 3 months later, we had another missing person case. A woman named Jennifer Hayes, hiking alone on the same trail system. I volunteered for the search team, despite Patricia's reservations. We found Jennifer's car at the trailhead. We found her backpack positioned carefully on a boulder, 20 feet off the trail. We found boot prints, heading in multiple directions. More prints than could be accounted for by one person. And on the second day of searching, I heard Jennifer's voice calling from deep in the forest. "Help me! I'm lost! Please help me!" But Jennifer had been found safe that morning. She had never gone hiking. She had been at her hotel the entire time, according to her family. I didn't follow the voice. I radioed the other search teams and told them to ignore any calls for help that came from off-trail locations. Some of them thought I was being paranoid, but Jake understood. He had started having his own experiences on night patrols. Voices of missing people, lights moving through the forest, tracks that led nowhere. The thing is learning. It's studying us, understanding how we operate, how we respond to missing person cases, and I think it's preparing for something bigger. I still work for the Park Service, but I've requested transfer to a desk job in the visitor center. I can't handle search and rescue anymore. Not when I know that some of the people calling for help aren't really people at all. Sometimes, late at night when I'm closing up the visitor center, I can hear them calling from the forest beyond the parking lot. Voices of hikers who disappeared years ago, voices of people I tried and failed to save. "Ranger Lopez," they call. "We're still lost. Please come find us." But I know better now. They're not lost. They're exactly where they want to be. And they're waiting for the next missing person case, the next opportunity to add to their collection. The worst part is the doubt it creates. Every missing person report that comes in now, I wonder, is this real, or is it them? Have they learned enough about our procedures to start creating fake cases, luring search teams into the wilderness? Last week, we had a family report their teenage son missing on the Highline Trail. Classic scenario. Day hike that ran too long, worried parents, all the usual elements, but when I ran the license plate on the family's car, It came back to a vehicle that was reported stolen 3 years ago in Seattle. When I tried to call the phone number they provided, it was disconnected. The family never existed, but their son was out there somewhere, waiting for a search team to come looking. I filed a report with Patricia, documenting my concerns about the incident. She listened patiently, then suggested I might benefit from extended administrative leave. She thinks the stress of the job has gotten to me, that I'm seeing patterns that don't exist. Maybe she's right. Maybe years of searching for people who vanish without a trace has finally broken something in my mind. Maybe the voices I hear calling from the forest are just wind through the trees, and the lights I see moving through the wilderness are just other rangers on patrol. But I don't think so. I think something has been hunting in our park for years, maybe decades, taking people who won't be missed immediately, learning from them, using them to understand how we operate. And I think it's almost ready to expand its operations. 3 days ago, I received a call from a ranger at Yellowstone. They had a missing person case that matched our pattern. Backpack found perfectly positioned, boot prints leading in impossible directions, equipment that suggested the person had never actually entered the park. The ranger wanted to know if we'd experienced anything similar. I told him yes, we had. Then I started making calls to other parks: Olympic, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Great Smoky Mountains. The same pattern was emerging across the country. Missing people who were never really missing. Voices calling from forests. Lights moving through wilderness areas at night. Whatever I encountered on that trail 3 months ago, it's not isolated to Glacier National Park. It's spread across the entire park system, and it's coordinating its activities. I've started keeping a private log of incidents, building a database of cases that don't fit normal patterns. Patricia doesn't know about it, and I'm not sure she'd believe me if she did, but other rangers are starting to notice. Quiet conversations in break rooms, shared looks when certain cases come up. We're all seeing the same things, hearing the same voices, following the same impossible tracks, and we're starting to realize that some missing person cases should never be solved. Because finding those people would mean finding the things that are wearing their faces. My name is Daniel Lopez, and I'm 34 years old. I've been a park ranger for 8 years, but I don't think I'll be one much longer. The voices are getting louder, more insistent. They know I know about them, and they want me to join their collection. Sometimes I catch myself responding to their calls, taking a step or two toward the forest before I realize what I'm doing. They're patient. They can wait. They know that eventually, curiosity or duty or simple human compassion will override my fear. When that happens, when I finally follow one of those voices into the wilderness, I'll become another missing person case. Another perfect mystery for the rangers who come after me to investigate. And maybe, if they listen carefully on quiet nights, they'll hear my voice calling from the forest. Ranger Morrison, Ranger Williams, we're lost out here. Please come find us. The thing about missing person cases is that they never really end. They just become someone else's problem. But I know the truth now. Some people who go missing in the wilderness don't want to be found. They want others to join them.